I fell on the floor, and I said as I got up, I couldn't find my son.
A 7-month-old baby boy was reportedly kidnapped right out of this Big Five parking lot. This is 7-month-old Emmanuel Haro, one of 5 children in this family from Cabazon, reportedly kidnapped last night in Yucaipa. Now, his mom told me that they were here last night at a nearby football stadium in Yucaipa with the other kids playing youth football, and she had to run down here to Big Five to buy some equipment for her stepson, specifically a mouth guard. When she got here to the parking lot, she says that's when she noticed her 7-month-old's diaper needed to be changed. So she says she got out of her truck, went around to the back, and laid him down on the seat to change his diaper when she was attacked from behind.
I got him out of the car seat, and I laid him down and so I could get his diapers ready. And somebody said, "Hola," and that's all I remember. And I saw white. And hearing sound, I fell on the floor, and I said as I got up, I couldn't find my son. I checked all around my truck, and I ran into Big Five, and I asked the lady if she saw a baby or someone with a baby. She said no. It was a happy boy. He smiled.
Whoever took our son, please give him back.
The search for this 7-month-old baby boy continues. Police and the family desperate to find out where he is.
Hello, dreamers, and welcome back to the show. What you just heard was a news clip from ABC7 in Southern California. I was in California this past weekend visiting my daughter for her birth week, and this story that I'm going to talk to you about today just broke going into last weekend, and it quickly went viral because of some of the news clips like the one I just played, and that was San Bernardino parents Rebecca and Jake Haro speaking to the media about their 7-month-old who was reported missing last Thursday. So I'm just going to dive right into the story. This is more of like a breaking news episode and give you the information that I've been able to find up to today. There's new information coming out every single day, which is why it took me a few days to put this story together, because every time I turn around, there's some other breaking news. So this all began unfolding on the evening of Thursday, August 14th, 2025. It happened in the parking lot of a shopping center in the city of Yucaipa, which is located in San Bernardino County, situated about 20 miles or 32 kilometers from downtown San Bernardino. I'd say it's about an hour and a half outside of downtown Los Angeles. So the mom, Rebecca, she had gone to that Big Five that evening to pick up a mouth guard for another child. I believe the other child, there are several other children involved in the story. I believe there are a total of 5. And some of them, I think at least 3 of them are stepchildren. I'm not 100% clear on everything just yet, although I did find out more information towards the end of this that I'll share with you. This is all still breaking news, and I'm learning the details along with you as I'm compiling this information for today's episode. I will clarify as we go along and familiarize myself with this still developing case. It's very mysterious, and I hope upon hope that this doesn't remain a mystery for very much longer. So the story that Rebecca Haro provided, she's the mother of the missing 7-month-old. She said that she and her husband, Emmanuel's father, Jake, and their children, like I said, I believe at least there's some variation whether or not they were present in the home and who was there and who wasn't there. I'm not quite sure. But they were in Yucaipa that day. They're from a different city. I can't think of it off the top of my head right now, but I will mention it later on in this episode. I remember jotting it down. So they were in Yucaipa that day for a baseball game for one of their older children when they realized that he was missing his mouth guard. So it was decided that Rebecca, the mom, would run to the nearby Big Five sporting goods store really quick to grab a new one. And she also took with her their youngest child, 7-month-old Emmanuel Haro. She took him with her on the shopping trip. Rebecca said that when she arrived, she parked her truck and she noticed that Emmanuel needed a diaper change. So she said that she laid him down in the seat of the car. We've all done that, right? I've changed babies in the back seat plenty of times. A friend of mine did it once in her trunk, which as a true crime podcast content creator looked kind of weird to me. But my trunk is usually kind of messy and full of stuff. But that would have probably been easier since the back seats are kind of slanted. And there's nothing worse than trying to change a poopy, squirmy baby on an incline, right? So anyway, Rebecca spoke to reporters about this incident. And I believe they first started speaking to the media the next day. And that is when people started having flashbacks of like Susan Smith and Casey Anthony. That there was something very, very off-putting about the way Rebecca presented on TV. And it started with the way that she delivered her pleas for help, her cadence, her weird breathing patterns, and the fact that she had a hard time making eye contact, and she also had a hard time producing tears. I have only ever lost my child once for a few minutes when she was about 6 or 7 years old, and we were at a flea market in Hawaii. I lost sight of her for about 5 minutes, and the fear was paralyzing. And nobody's getting that paralyzing fear vibe from this woman at all. The bottom line is, in these news interviews that Rebecca gave, she came across just as bad, if not worse, than Chris Watts, when he famously got on the news the day his wife Shanann and their 2 girls went missing 7 years ago, almost to the day when baby Emmanuel went missing. I think the anniversary was the 18th of her death and disappearance. That was just 2 or 3 days ago or so, back in August of 2018. You don't even have to look at the video footage of Rebecca's interviews. You can just hear it in her voice that something doesn't seem right. And we just can't find a way to be comfortable with the story that she's provided to the world. Now, this is still early on, and all of us thinking that this woman and possibly her husband did something or know something more, had something to do with Emmanuel's disappearance. And we might be wrong in jumping to these conclusions, but the fact that the search efforts for Emmanuel were scaled back so quickly is a huge indicator that the investigators know something is up with the story, and the use of these various search and rescue resources just can't be justified. It can't be wasted on the search when the parents have pretty much stopped cooperating. When I heard the searches were being called off or scaled down, I thought, wow, that's a big deal. Like, what does all that mean? At this point, it's really too soon to tell. But if we're wrong, and hopefully we are, I'll bring it up in a future episode that I am, in fact, wrong, and I will apologize. I do hope Emmanuel is found safe and sound, but it is not looking good right now, you know. Whether it was the parents or if he was really kidnapped, the longer that this goes, the chances of him being found grow more and more slim. But anyway, Rebecca said that she had gotten Emmanuel out of his car seat and laid him down so she could get the diaper ready. She claimed that somebody came up from behind her and said, "Hola," and that's all she remembered. Now, as she said this in her interview, and you heard it in the beginning, she said she saw white and that's all she remembers. You can hear it, she's taking these intermittent breaths that seem like they're supposed to sound like when you have that abdominal contraction when you've cried so hard. It happens to kids and it happens to adults too, when we sometimes describe it as crying so hard that we hyperventilate. It's like a muscle reaction that we really can't control. And in the videos of the mom, Rebecca, she's lacking many of the outward signs of someone who should have been in tears for an entire day and night by then, you know? She's got no redness in her eyes, the tip of her nose or in her cheeks, nothing has turned red. She's not sniffling. She's not got a runny nose. She's providing a statement that just feels and sounds disjointed. And most of all, like I said, there are no tears. But anyways, she said that someone approached her from behind and only said the word "hola." That's all she remembered from there, claiming that whomever it was that approached her from behind, attacked her in some manner, struck her in such a way that caused her to see white, and she got completely knocked out instantaneously. She said she was laying on the ground when she came to, that she looked around for her baby and found that he was gone. She said, quote, I was going to get the diaper and someone said, hola, and I didn't see nothing since. I woke up right here on the floor and didn't see Emmanuel. So I find it really hard to believe that a crime like this is happening in this day and time in the middle of a busy shopping strip in the middle of the afternoon, right? The late afternoon. This type of baby abduction by a stranger is so rare nowadays. It was rare before, but I think it's even more so now because it is really difficult to get away with stuff with all the surveillance cameras everywhere, you know? But anything is possible, I guess. There are many things that don't really seem to add up with this whole scenario that Rebecca described to the news, which is why all of us immediately had our liar alarms going off right from the jump. We'll talk about cameras in a few minutes, but for those of you who have seen the interviews that this mom gave to the news in the day or so following Emmanuel being reported missing, you would have noticed a bruise on Rebecca's face. And this bruise shifted in the different videos or interviews that she gave as time passed by. It first looked like she had sort of a black eye around her right eye. And then in some later footage of her speaking to the media, it seemed that that bruise had started to get darker, a little bit lower onto her right cheek. But the one thing that many, if not all of us, have seemed to agree on when we look at this is that bruise appears to be in the later stages of healing. Like this bruise happened at least a day or more earlier than the day of the alleged attack and kidnapping. Now, I'm not a medical expert, but there are some certain things that I came to notice about bruises, particularly in the last few months of my mother's life, as she continued to live in denial about her rapidly declining condition. The last few months of her life were difficult because she just refused to believe that she was in such a way that she could no longer walk unassisted. She refused to use a wheelchair. She refused to move around the house with a walker. This might be a little TMI, but she was also incontinent, but refused to use the bedside commode, and you can imagine that that was a disaster. She would use her cane once in a while, but mostly she wanted to use it as a weapon or to try to break windows or to bang on doors and walls to try to get attention. She was accusing us of holding her prisoner in the house when the fact was she was just a danger to herself and others. So the unfortunate result was that my mom would frequently fall. And she would have these terrible bruises and hematomas about her face and head. And the bruises tended to heal in a similar way, at least the ones on her face that caused black eyes, that I saw in the bruise on Rebecca's face, the mom of the missing baby, on the news. It seems that her bruise, as it developed over the day or two that she was actually speaking to the media, that bruise gets lower and darker as it heals because, I guess, of where the blood is settling. But the bruise that she had reminded me of at least one or two of my mom's bruises that she sustained from one of her falls. After a couple days, the bruise was dark and more prominent, lower and further away from her eye, where the bruises originally formed. Like I said, I'm taking a guess based on my own observations, but that bruise on the mom's face in the news did not look fresh at all. And that's one of the very first issues that everyone took with this whole story was, what's up with this bruise and why are there no tears? Going and talking to the media, they were probably pressured into it. And it doesn't ever go well for these people when they try to fake grief or fear, when they tell a story like Scott Peterson and Chris Watts and Susan Smith and all the others that have come and made public pleas for the safe return of their loved one. We see right through it now, right? Another thing that is bothering the entire true crime community is, how do you get a black eye when you're struck from the back? Rebecca has already excused herself out of having to answer any of these questions about what happened after she heard the word Ola, because she said that she saw white and remembered nothing. The next thing she remembered was waking up on the ground and being unable to find Emmanuel. So what she did with that was effectively make herself unable and unavailable to provide any kind of details of the crime at all. The only thing that she could provide was that it was a male voice saying Ola and nothing else. No description of the attacker, no vehicle, no direction that this person headed, no direction that this person came from. I mean, literally nothing. She was struck from behind, yet somehow got a black eye. And she doesn't have to explain it, since she's claimed to have been knocked out cold. So we can only be left to assume that she was either further attacked while she was knocked out, or she somehow got that black eye when she fell to the ground. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, though either one of those scenarios is possible. But the black eye and the attack from the back doesn't make sense, which is why we're not believing her at this point. And with each passing day since this news broke a week ago, it's only getting worse and worse for both Rebecca and the baby's father, Jake. And it doesn't look like it's going to be getting any easier for either one of them anytime soon. So after she came to, Rebecca said that she looked around the parking lot for her baby, calling out his name in doing so. So, dreamers, picturing ourselves in this situation, if we're looking around a parking lot and we're trying to find our missing infant, an infant that doesn't walk and doesn't talk and barely just learned how to giggle, would we be calling out his name? That's a tough one for me, because I'm not sure I'd be shouting the name of my missing child unless my child was at an age that he or she could hear me and respond, right? I mean, I can't imagine being in a panic and calling out the name of my missing child out of fear, or just being in this horrifying moment and not really knowing or caring or thinking about what I'm saying or doing. I just want attention paid to the fact that my baby was missing, and I would be looking for help from anyone who may have seen anything. But knowing myself, I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't be calling out the name of my 7-month-old, because it's literally pointless. I might go around looking for people nearby that may have seen something, but I wouldn't be yelling out for the 7-month-old's name. You know what I mean? But then, having said that, I wonder if there were people who saw something, wouldn't someone have noticed and come to help Rebecca? I mean, literally, she said she was knocked to the ground in the parking lot of the Big Five for however long. Nobody really gave a time frame. And what I'm saying is, did anybody drive by or walk by or see anything? Because, when people drive through parking lots, they're usually watching for two things: parking spots and pedestrians, right? I mean, technically, we're supposed to be on the lookout and drive cautiously through parking lots, right? If someone was attacked the way that Rebecca says that she was, don't you think she would have perhaps yelled out for help or screamed before she passed out? Or was that knockout blow from the back so powerful that it not only caused a bruise to the opposite side of her face, but instantly caused her to pass out before she was even able to make any kind of cry for help? I have a serious issue with this aspect of Rebecca's story, because it really isn't that easy to knock someone out cold. And if the only injury Rebecca sustained was that bruise on her cheek, it doesn't look nearly as severe that it would actually cause her to immediately black out without her having made a sound, without seeing a thing, without realizing what had just happened at all, only to come to however long afterwards. And what I don't think this woman realizes is that it's actually really difficult to knock someone out cold. And I don't know if I've talked about that specifically in the past, but I do know I've talked about how when someone is planning a murder and how that plan can quickly go awry, because it's actually very difficult to kill someone. I think the media, TV, movies, and film have made it look a lot easier than it actually is. And I remember clearly speaking about this in terms of what happened with Jodi Arias. I talked about her in the episodes I just did on Patreon with the TikTok star murders. I mean, we all know that Jodi did that shit, right? She planned the whole murder that she committed very meticulously. Her plan was to murder Travis Alexander. If you remember the case, you're familiar with it, down there in Mesa, Arizona back in 2008. As impossible as it seems, there are people who have never heard of Jodi Arias. And like I said, I did talk about her recently in my Patreon episodes with the Ali and Anna Abulaban. Jodi was a woman scorned who stabbed her ex-boyfriend to death and shot him once through the face. Her plan was to get Travis into a vulnerable position and just to stab him to death in the back while he wasn't looking. I think that Jodi had it in her mind that she would just plunge that knife into Travis's back and he would do what we see happening in the movies. The victim will dramatically pause as the knife goes in and then slowly turn around and look directly at their attacker in the eye. And when he would see that it was Jodi betraying him in the worst ways, he would gaze at her longingly as she made sure the last thing that Travis ever saw in this life was her face. And then he would dramatically slump to the ground and she would watch as he drew his final breaths, right? That's what I could see Jodi Arias imagining happening. One good deep stab wound to the back and he'll just fall to death. But that wasn't the case. Jodi started stabbing Travis in the back while he was naked in the shower in what seemed to immediately turn into a frenzy because Travis was not going to go down Hollywood style. He ran for his life. At least he tried to. He got out of the shower and he started down the hallway to try to get out of his bedroom, but Jodi chased him down. He expelled some blood at his sink and vanity area of his bathroom, and the struggle to get Travis to fall to the ground continued. Jodi just kept stabbing him over and over in the back. The struggle between the two of them ended up in the hallway where Travis eventually began his collapse to the ground. And this is when I think Jodi got that bloody handprint on the wall as she tried to steady herself while attacking Travis and he's fighting back. He tried to get away from her by crawling down the hallway. And I think he was probably shouting out or yelling for help, which is when I think Jodi decided that she needed to slit Travis's throat in order to shut him up. So she did that, leaving a large pool of blood in the threshold of where the bedroom led into the closet and the hallway towards the bathroom. And it was a walk-through closet, if I'm not mistaken, with a door on each end. And then from there, Jodi dragged Travis back to the bathroom where she left him in the stall, the shower stall. And when she put him in there, it was there she took like a cup and rinsed his body off in order to get rid of any of her DNA, or at least try to, since they had spent the entire day leading up to the murder in bed. And as she dragged him back to the shower, that's when Jodi dropped the camera that she had. Remember, she had him in the shower. She was taking intimate pictures of him. She had him doing poses, including turning his back towards her, which is when she started stabbing him. And she had that camera with her and she held on to it during her attack, but then she dropped it as she was dragging Travis, taking inadvertent pictures that ultimately sank her original story that she wasn't at Travis's house that day. That was going to be her alibi, that she wasn't there. But anyway, Jodi was left with a huge mess and all kinds of evidence tying her to the crime, since Travis didn't die immediately when she stabbed him like she thought that he would. I think she thought Travis would just drop dead, since there was no way she was going to be able to take him down in a face-to-face confrontation. Jodi also had a gun and ended up shooting him, but I think the reasons why she didn't just use the gun in the first place was because of the noise that it would make. So she chose stabbing, thinking that it would be quick and easy, and it turned out to be anything but. Well, all that being said, I tend to think the same thing when you try to knock someone out cold. I don't watch a whole lot of fighting like boxing or UFC, but it happens once in a while when a person gets hit just right and it drops them to the ground instantly. They fall straight down or completely still except for maybe some heavy breathing and maybe some eye fluttering. It happens, but not that often. So when it does happen, it makes for like a really exciting sanctioned fight, right? But it's not that easy to hit someone just so that they're out cold in an instant. We've also seen fights go the distance with hundreds of punches being thrown and landed, and still people manage to stay upright. And that's because it's not easy to send someone into unconsciousness with a single blow. It has to be hard enough to literally cause your brain to rattle inside your skull, and that would have to happen in a significant enough of a way for you to pass out cold. It takes a very hard punch in just the right place for that to happen, and the injury that Rebecca had to her face doesn't match up with any aspects of her claims, at least to me. But as I said, I'm no expert, and who's to say that this woman wasn't attacked from behind and sustained a black eye from a subsequent punch to the face following the initial blow, or that she didn't hit her face on her way down as she fell. It's possible, but still, that bruise looks older than a day or so. Getting back to the story, Rebecca said that after she came to, I don't know how long she was out for, but it doesn't seem like there was too much time that passed because nobody found her lying on the ground in the parking lot. So when she came to, she got up. She said she looked around the car and didn't see her son. She called out his name and he didn't respond. So I believe she ended up going into the Big Five asking if they saw someone with a baby. Nobody saw anyone. So she called 911 to report that Emmanuel had been kidnapped. And while the mystery surrounding the baby's disappearance continues to grow with each passing day, we get another report from the San Bernardino Sheriff's Office about what Emmanuel's parents are doing and not doing. One of the first things that got reported over the weekend was the fact that in various interviews that investigators had with Rebecca, her story began to have inconsistencies. That has been the word that's been thrown around ever since. After the mom or both the mom and dad were confronted about these inconsistencies, they stopped cooperating with police and they cut off communications with a group that was called in to help, the Uvalde Foundation for Kids. They provided resources for the search and a reward, and they ended up calling off the efforts on their part. An article in the Vegas Valley News read, "The Uvalde Foundation for Kids is urging the parents of missing 7-month-old Emmanuel Haro to step forward and join the effort to find their son, issuing a bold public statement on August 19, 2025. Join the search and you will be protected." The article continued, quote, "The national nonprofit formed in response to the Robb Elementary School shooting had previously withdrawn from the case and rescinded its reward offer due to what it called a series of disturbing red flags. These included inconsistencies in the family's account of the alleged kidnapping and a complete breakdown in communication from Emmanuel's mother, Rebecca Haro. Daniel Chapin, founder of the Uvalde Foundation for Kids, spoke publicly when the organization pulled out of the case earlier this month. Quote, "We cannot in good conscience utilize our team and resources when so much is missing in this case," Chapin said at a press conference in Central Texas. "Of particular concern to us lies within the inconsistencies in the details and the sudden decision by the mother to end communication with law enforcement and our team originally prepared to help. Tell me what parent would do that who was missing a child? Something is not right in this whole picture. We hope law enforcement will continue to pursue the case so that this precious child may be found and placed in a safe environment." It was just 2 days after Emmanuel went missing that his parents stopped cooperating with law enforcement, prompting the Uvalde Foundation to pull out of the offerings to help in the search as well as contributing to the reward. When the initial report was made by Rebecca, the report of her child being missing, the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department launched a massive search, along with the assistance of neighboring Riverside Sheriff's Department as well. They made an official post on their website with Emmanuel's picture indicating that he had been kidnapped, and canine dogs were brought in immediately to the parking lot area of the Big Five to try and get a track on the baby. But within days, the Sheriff's Department also scaled back their searches, indicating the reasons being inconsistencies in Rebecca's story. The claims that she was making just weren't adding up. And so the parents began to fall under an increasingly growing suspicion. In fact, by Monday, August 18th, 4 days since Emmanuel's disappearance, the San Bernardino Sheriff's Office announced that they had brought in cadaver dogs to the home where the baby lived with his mom and dad, and the focus of the investigation appeared to be shifting in their direction. It has also been reported that blood was found in the home during that search, but whose blood it was has not been determined as of this recording. Search warrants were obtained and executed, lots of them, to not only include the family home, but I also heard as I was writing this that the father's vehicle was seized, and they've also collected a large amount of surveillance video. And speaking of surveillance, much has been made of the kinds of surveillance that there was available there in the Big Five parking lot where the abduction allegedly took place. As it turned out, just by happenstance, in this day and age where cameras are posted up just about everywhere we turn, not just in businesses and outside of businesses, but also everybody's homes and their doorbells, their cars. The Teslas have cameras that have a 360-degree view around the whole vehicle. But this very Big Five, where all of this apparently took place, had no cameras in the parking lot. I mean, it probably has cameras now, but for whatever reason, this property did not have them. So the search warrants, the indication that many of them were served, and it was said that there is a large amount of video that has been collected. What this means is that they really went out there and hit up everybody in every place that they possibly could, including the various routes that Rebecca would have taken when she drove from the football game to the Big Five. I believe a report that I was listening to yesterday said that there were likely only 3 routes that she would have taken, and that they gotten a hold of the footage in those intersection cameras that may have been picked up during the time frame that all of this supposedly went down. They also can get camera footage from all the businesses along those routes, as well as cameras on public buses. There's plenty of footage that is probably still being looked at as we speak, as investigators work to corroborate or disprove Rebecca's story. Another thing about the surveillance involved a report that we heard over the weekend that there were some staff members of the Big Five who reported that Rebecca called the store a day or two before the kidnapping. She said that something had happened to her vehicle in their parking lot and wanted to know if they had CCTV cameras out there. This is going to be fairly easy to confirm. I think that if Rebecca did in fact make that call to the Big Five in advance of the kidnapping, it would have probably been pretty easy to check up on her phone records to see if she did call them. And you know what? That would probably be something a person planning a crime like this would easily overlook, you know? And I'm being a little bit on the judgy side here, but it kind of seems like we're dealing with a woman here whose driveway doesn't quite make it all the way to the street, if you know what I'm saying. Rebecca Haro doesn't appear to be very bright. She may have a low IQ. She may have some cognitive issues or mental illness going on. So we're not talking criminal geniuses here, right? I don't know. It's only speculation at this point. But if this woman did something to harm this child, she could have been struggling with some postpartum depression. Someone in our Facebook group mentioned this feeling a little bit like an Andrea Yates type of situation. You know, with the comparison of both of these women being in homes with 5 children and these moms just not really seeming to be all that with it. Andrea Yates, as a reminder, is the Texas mom who drowned her 5 children in a bathtub in 2001. Andrea Yates had a relatively significant history of mental illness that, if I remember correctly, was directly linked to the state that she was in after being pregnant and that she and her husband were even told after their fourth child, maybe even earlier than that they needed to stop having children, that this was seriously detrimental to Andrea's mental health, but yet they did it again. I believe mostly guided by their religious beliefs regarding procreation and closest to God or heaven or whatever. Andrea Yates had been one of the most hated women in America at the time, but much of that can now be attributed to attitudes towards mental illness during that time frame. Her case and trial would have probably gone a lot differently if it had happened today. And I immediately thought of Lori Vallow Daybell and how she sometimes comes across as being a little off her rocker too, with all her religious malarkey that she likes to spread around. Her trial had been held up for some time. I even think for a short period of time she was found incompetent to stand trial or unfit to stand trial, but was ultimately ruled fit for trial, right? Considering what I said about Andrea Yates when it comes to Lori Vallow Daybell, she wasn't really able to garner public sympathy in the way that I think Andrea Yates would have if her case had happened today, because Lori Vallow didn't have that same history of mental health issues that Andrea did. In fact, when her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, had her committed for psychiatric evaluation, Lori made it out of there with flying colors. No mental illness going on with her. When I see Lori talking now that she's been convicted of enough murders to be considered a bona fide serial killer, at first glance, she does come off as a little bit nutty, but because she's so conniving and so manipulative, we all know it's an act. She's trying to make what happened to her children seem like some great cosmic tragedy, when the fact of the matter is what happened to her children had to do with only one thing: Lori's narcissism. Everything that happened to them, to Charles, to Tammy, and to Brandon Bordeaux, it was all for Lori's benefit. Everything that woman did and continues to do is self-serving. It has to be, otherwise she won't even waste her time. It goes without saying that I'm highly suspicious of Rebecca Haro and her story, and I'm not very good at giving benefits of the doubt, but at this point, I guess we still have to, because we just don't have any good answers yet. I think the answers will come. I don't think we'll have to wait that long. I think the pressure is going to break these people. And I also don't think that this is going to end well at all. Another thing that we found out in the days following Emmanuel's disappearance is that both of his parents were asked to take a polygraph test, and they both refused to do so. And while a lot of people will offer to take polygraph tests to try and prove their innocence because they know that the results are largely unreliable and are not admissible in court, so they're not necessarily afraid to fail or get inconclusive results. And to flat out refuse isn't all that suspicious to me either, because if they do fail, police will use it against them throughout the investigation, even though the whole premise of the test is really to exclude suspects and persons of interest rather than to include them. And they're really, the polygraph test is really just a tool to help guide an investigation. And it really isn't that good of a look to refuse to take one as a suspect. However, I think most attorneys would tell their clients to not do it anyway. So I don't hold it against Emmanuel's parents for refusing the polygraph. It was a wise decision on their part. And they've lawyered up too, and they've stopped talking to police, which can also be a wise decision if they're innocent, because right now it's not looking good for them. And if I were innocent and this kind of pressure were being put on me, I think I would shut down too. So as the investigation has gone along and this week began, we started to hear about Emmanuel's father, Jake Haro, having somewhat of a troubled background in terms of his criminal history. And somewhat troubled is putting it lightly. According to articles on 2fab.com, abc7.com, AOL.com, Distractify, and the GazetteDirect.com, Jake's criminal history includes a conviction for willful cruelty to a child, which is related to an incident back in 2018 where there were some significant injuries inflicted on an infant. What had happened was Jake and an ex-girlfriend, they showed up at an emergency room with their 10-week-old newborn baby girl. And this newborn had some really serious and troubling injuries, including multiple rib fractures, a skull fracture, and a brain hemorrhage. And I also found out some injuries to her legs. Those medical professionals who treated the infant's injuries at the time determined that those injuries were indicative of the baby having been abused. Jake had provided a story about having dropped the baby on a sink divider, but based on the injuries, it was found that that explanation is inconsistent and implausible. Jake's case wasn't adjudicated until 5 years later in 2023, probably held up in part due to COVID. So what does all of that mean to us right now? Well, I've been trying to figure out what other children were involved in the Haro family. It seems as though Jake and Rebecca have 2 children together, perhaps. I believe there was a 2-year-old that an attorney who represented Jake in his willful cruelty case spoken to the media. He has spoken to the media since the story broke, and he did confirm that there was another child that the couple shared that has been removed from the home. And I do believe that there are 5 kids in total here, all of them having been fathered by Jake, but not all of them mothered by Rebecca. I found an article in GazetteDirect.com entitled Baby Emmanuel's Parents Meet Rebecca and Jake Haro. So let's see what that article has to say. Like I said, I'm learning as we go along here. So the article described this case as having evolved into a complex puzzle riddled with inconsistency, a troubling family history, and a community desperate for answers. The article stated, as the investigation unfolded, the initial wave of sympathy and community support began to fracture. Law enforcement officials quickly noted troubling inconsistencies in Rebecca Haro's account of the events that evening. When detectives confronted her with these discrepancies during an interview, she abruptly ceased cooperating and ended the conversation. This decision to stop speaking with authorities proved to be a significant turning point, leading the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department to publicly state that they could not rule out foul play in Emmanuel's disappearance. The absence of any witnesses, surveillance footage capturing an abduction, or evidence of a stranger's presence only deepened the skepticism. The narrative of a random kidnapping began to unravel, forcing investigators to take a closer look at home. The article then said of the abuse, quote, "The history of child abuse allegations has become a central point in the current investigation. Compounding the situation, Jake is facing additional legal troubles with pending charges for being a felon in possession of a firearm. In the wake of Emmanuel's disappearance, investigators executed a search warrant on the family's home in Cabazon. That's the name of the city that they live in, I couldn't think of earlier. Using canine units to scour the property. While officials didn't confirm the use of cadaver dogs, they did reveal a crucial and distressing detail. Another young child, a 2-year-old, had been removed from the home by Child Protective Services. So this article also pointed out how the way that the parents were acting in the wake of Emmanuel having gone missing has caused alarm amongst the community and the public at large. They're getting judged pretty hard by the court of social media. After both of the parents had gotten up there on the news making pleas to the media on camera for the safe return of their son, in short order they stopped cooperating and retained attorneys. As far as the writing of this episode, they haven't said anything more publicly since. Emmanuel's grandmother spoke to the media, and I assumed it was Rebecca's mother because she seemed to only speak about her, and she said that Rebecca was asked to take a lie detector test, but it was Jake who refused on both of their behalves until they had legal representation. But generally speaking, attorneys will advise their clients to not take a lie detector, so that wasn't going to go anywhere. I don't hold their refusal to take that lie detector against them, like I said earlier, but the optics of it don't bode well for either one of them. The public usually grows even more suspicious when something like that happens. When a kid is missing, the parents should be doing everything that they can to help further the investigation, including taking a lie detector, no matter what the perception of it is. It can only be used as an investigative tool, and if the police already think that you're up to something, what difference does it make then? They're already suspicious to begin with. It was right after the parents stopped cooperating that the Uvalde Foundation rolled back on their search efforts and pulled out the $5,000 reward that they offered. But the community is still holding out hope for the safe return of Emmanuel. A candlelight vigil was held at the Big 5 parking lot where all of this took place, with people getting together to offer prayers for Emmanuel to be brought home safely. The story has grown nationwide ever since, and the community and the entire country are keeping watch of the story, hoping for a good outcome. But with the parents acting weird and shady, it's not looking good, and the entire online sleuthing community is going full speed, picking apart everything about this couple, from their personal lives to the way they looked and acted on camera. The speculation about the bruise being older than the kidnapping, the way that they spoke, their body language, and not to mention talking about baby Emmanuel in the past tense, the red flags were flying everywhere. Okay, so now it's Thursday. All of that I just spoke to you, I wrote yesterday. And I've jumped back to this part because it's been a week this evening that Emmanuel was reported missing, and I woke up to more details about Emmanuel's dad, Jake Haro, and his previous conviction for that willful cruelty to a child charge. The cousin who has taken in, there was somebody who spoke to the media whose cousin took in Jake's children, including the 10-week-old that was the victim of this willful cruelty. That cousin of the person who has custody of these children came forward and spoke to some YouTube creators and podcasters and gave more details about the case and Emmanuel's family, and it is much worse than we first heard. I told you about the injuries that 10-week-old infant sustained at the hands of Emmanuel's father, but now that this cousin has reported what that child's life is like today, and it's not good. So we're discovering not just the reasons why the Haro children had been previously taken from the home, but also how many times that this has reportedly happened in the past. The damage that Jake Haro inflicted on his 10-month-old baby daughter actually caused lifelong debilitating injuries that require that child, who is now 7 years old, to be cared for around the clock for the rest of her life. That cousin of the person who has adopted these children also provided photos, and I'll actually post up the screenshots that I got today. And I have to say that it's surprising that the person who is raising these children allowed this person to come forward with these new disturbing details. Usually the family keeps things pretty close to the vest, but not this time. They've come out publicly and put what Jake Haro did to his other children on full display for the world to see, and it is as ugly as he is. In the picture, this child that he abused is now 7. They show pictures of her when she was first hospitalized at the age of 10 weeks. She's in a hospital bed. She has a neck brace on. She's hooked up to tubes and wires. And I had already listed the injuries. She has multiple rib fractures, a skull fracture, a brain hemorrhage, and injuries to her legs. This report was given by a family member named Vanessa Avila, and that is someone closely associated with the family, or at least family of this baby, and that 10-month-old was ultimately adopted by one of Vanessa Avila's cousins. That cousin is not only providing extraordinary care for this child, she also gave her a new name, Promise. There are also a couple of other pictures of her as she was getting older and at her current age of 7. In one picture, she's strapped into a specialized stroller, and another one, she's strapped into a wheelchair. She has been rendered unable to walk as a result of the injuries inflicted by her father, Jake Haro. In addition to being left paralyzed, she was also left blind, mute, and unable to swallow due to injuries caused by strangulation. It has been determined that Promise's brain is only working at about a 3% capacity, and she's kept alive with a feeding tube. And this will be the way it will be for her for the rest of her life because of her father, Jake Haro, the rest of her life, she's going to be blind, mute, unable to walk, unable to talk, unable to eat. And for all he did to this baby, Jake Haro was given 6 months jail time in a work release program. And this was only in 2023. This was recent that this conviction happened. There was another 2-year-old that was in the Haro home at the time that Emmanuel went missing. So that means that that child was likely born the same year that Jake was given that sentence. And then they went on to have Emmanuel at the beginning of this year. He's only 7 months old, so he was born in January, maybe early February. And as it turns out, the same person who adopted Promise, the 10-week-old that Jake Haro beat into being basically a vegetable, the same person who took that child in has another child of his, an older one that she also took in. That child's being raised by the person who's raising Promise, and that older child was diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome at birth. That child was also named after his dad, Jake, but his name, like Promise's, was changed as well. He's now known as Carlos, thank goodness. And what do you know? This is also the same person that had the one who has taken in Jake's 2 older children is now taking care of the 2-year-old that was just removed from the Haro home following Emmanuel's disappearance. So this person is taking care of 3 of Jake's children. 2 of them have been adopted. And on top of everything else, Jake Haro still has ongoing legal problems as this case with 7-month-old Emmanuel has been unfolding, including that probation violation involving the firearm possession that I mentioned earlier. He has a court date coming up for that. So with Jake Haro's background being put under a microscope during this whole mess that he's in the middle of here with Emmanuel's disappearance, it's raised a lot of questions and concerns about his and Rebecca's potential involvement, and it has only made the investigation into this disappearance even more complex the more we learn as the hours and days tick by. And I just learned that information about the condition that 7-year-old is in this morning. These details surrounding Jake's previous conviction involving this newborn, it has me wondering if maybe Emmanuel's mom might potentially be a victim too. But as far as I know, as of this recording, nothing has been said about it. We're getting reports about the family's troubled history, but I have not heard a word about any kind of domestic violence between the parents just yet. So it had me wondering if Rebecca might also be covering up for Jake. Maybe she's afraid of her husband. I mean, a guy who's capable of doing what he's been convicted of doing to a child, I have no doubt that he'd put hands on his wife or girlfriend too. Maybe he's the one that gave Rebecca that black eye that we all saw on TV. Remember, he's the one that came up with the story about having dropped his 10-week-old daughter in the sink. This whole making up of stories to explain away child abuse can be seen as a pattern here with this guy. This is a guy who literally had the nerve to walk into a hospital emergency room with a gravely wounded child and try to make the claim in the face of medical professionals who are light years more intelligent than this guy that the child was dropped in a sink. I'm assuming that the story was that he was giving the baby a bath, and even that, I don't believe for 1 second that this guy was bathing a 10-week-old. He's not a caregiver. He's an abuser. This guy, for whatever reasons, like other abusers that we've talked about in the past, they just keep having kids for some reason. But that's the story that Jake Haro came up with that doctors found to be implausible. And guess what his story about Emmanuel being kidnapped was? Another elaborate tall tale that Jake Haro could have very likely came up with, once again, to cover up something that he had done to that child. I mean, the last time he only had to cover up life-altering, debilitating injuries. This time around, maybe the abuse went even further than that. And now he had to cover up something even worse that he'd done to Emmanuel. The only thing worse would be murder, right? So it's definitely possible that he's abusing Rebecca as well. Maybe Jake Haro's the one that gave her that black eye, and she's coming forward to the media under fear and duress. All of this, of course, is only speculation. None of this can be confirmed, and only she can speak to that. And by now, you know what? She's had a week. If she is also a victim too, it's time to come out with it and get this guy behind bars fast and stop protecting him. Because if she's protecting him and she gets caught and never really comes forward with her true story, we're not going to believe her later on. If this ever goes to trial and she decides to claim that she was a domestic violence victim, her story is going to come under question and scrutiny because she didn't come forward right away when she should have. For the sake of her children, she should have. But I do understand why she hasn't, if she is truly a victim as well. So, dreamers, what are we left with here? A stranger abduction? It is truly a rare thing for a child to be taken by a stranger. Even more rare is for a mom to be attacked and the baby basically ripped from her arms. Statistically speaking, about 95% of the children who are reported missing are found pretty quickly. Usually it's a kid running away or some kind of miscommunication, and it gets resolved without ever even hitting the media. Most of the remaining 5% of children reported missing involve a parent or a relative who took the child, with a very, very narrow percentage, about 0.1% of the children reported missing, are victims of a stranger abduction. In fact, I found an article on Reason.com that was entitled, "Enough Stranger Danger, Children Are Rarely Abducted by Those They Don't Know." And among the things that this article says, it says that children are not more likely to be abducted today than they were decades ago, and the chances of them being returned safely is higher than it used to be. And the article, which I listed in the show notes, it has all the statistics about typical abductions and the fact that the story Rebecca and Jake Haro told to the media is a huge statistical anomaly in every way. The age at which Emmanuel was kidnapped is rare. How he was kidnapped is rare. The location where he was kidnapped is rare. Even the fact that the kidnapped victim in this case was a boy also makes this very rare. Everything about the story that Jake and Rebecca told involved the unlikeliest of scenarios in almost every aspect, and that is one of the biggest reasons why they've fallen under suspicion, because it sounds just as unlikely and made up as the whole dropping of the 10-week-old into the sink story. To me, this is a pattern evident in Jake Haro's history when it comes to his children, when it comes to child abuse, and when it comes to his children being removed from his home. That is what Emmanuel Haro was born into. So, as we record, the search for Emmanuel is still ongoing, and it seems most of that is going to come in the way of law enforcement continuing to apply pressure on the parents. The community and the internet are also putting the pressure on too. Emmanuel Haro is described as being approximately 24 inches long and weighing approximately 21 pounds. He has brown hair and brown eyes, and one of his physical characteristics that stands out and is very distinctive is that he's cross-eyed. He was last seen wearing a black onesie with a Nike swoosh on it. The San Bernardino Sheriff's Office is still looking at new tips and leads every day, as is the Riverside Sheriff's Department as well. Sightings of Emmanuel have been reported, but as of this recording, none of those sightings have been confirmed. So the questions will stay in place for now. Was this a stranger abduction? Was what Rebecca described to us the truth? Was this family truly victimized in this way? Or is this some kind of bizarre kidnapping hoax that Emmanuel's parents came up with to cover up something more nefarious? Well, as long as Rebecca and Jake Haro have decided to stop cooperating, to stop talking, and to refuse to help with the investigation or the search, we are just going to be looking directly at them for answers, because of all the people who should be out heading up the investigation, leading the charge. It should be them, and it's not. We all just want to know, where is baby Emmanuel? If you have any information about this missing child, the Specialized Investigations Division in San Bernardino can be reached at area code 909-890-4904. If you would like to remain anonymous, you can do so. You can call WeTip at 1-800-78-CRIME, CRIME, or visit their website, wetip.com. The links to all the articles that I referenced throughout this story are listed in the show notes. I want to thank you all so much for listening. And as always, take care, be safe, and sweet dreams.